Welcome to Writing While Black, the podcast where we pull up to the kitchen table and have real conversations about writing that the craft world keeps avoiding. I'm your host, High Priestess Lakeisha. So get you a plate, something to drink, and pull up a chair, beloved. Let's talk about writing while black. Last week was the spring equinox. Aries season is finally here. The new astrological year has finally begun. If you felt the shift, you didn't imagine it, it was real. All of us felt it. I don't know about you, but I was so happy for Pisces season to end. I felt so waterlogged during Pisces season. It was ridiculous. And to have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, it just made everything heavier, much more complicated. So I was really happy when the season shifted and we came out of the water and into the fire. I even treated myself to a new notebook for the equinox. And I have been getting back to a morning routine I used to use several years ago. I'm not really sure why I stopped doing this morning routine. It wasn't one of those where, you know how your life shifts, things change and you have to adjust and adapt your routines. It wasn't that. I just stopped doing it for some reason and I couldn't really identify why, but it came up again. Oh, I should go back to that. So treated myself to a new notebook. I used the equinox as an excuse to treat myself, and I'm slowly getting back to it. So before I open up my laptop, before I check anything, including my phone, it's just me, my journal, a deck of cards, a very strong cup of tea, and whatever needs to come through that morning. I say all that because it's connected to what we're talking about today. Being present with the work before the work becomes performance. I published an essay this past Sunday in honor of Aries season. If you don't know, Aries is the child of the zodiac. He's cardinal fire. It's his energy that kickstarts everything. I don't know if you've noticed, but as soon as spring hits, everybody goes into kind of like a frenzy. They want to clean everything. They want to start all these new projects, and they want to do 50 million things all at one time. That is Aries. The essay is called Fire Practice, the Scene You're Reporting. So if you go to my Substack, you can find it under the Elemental Mystery section. And if you're one of my paid members, you have access to the full practice that comes with instructions, as well as a writing prompt at the bottom to guide you through it. If you read the essay, some of what I'm about to say will land differently. If you haven't read it, that's fine. You'll still get what you need from this episode. So let's get into it. I want to talk about a sentence I've written in editorial letters and feedback notes to writers probably hundreds of times. The sentence is, I wasn't pulled in, or some version of it. Like, I had trouble connecting with this narrator. The opening didn't draw me in. I found myself at a distance from the story. All of that is really saying the same thing. I wasn't pulled in. It just depends on who I'm writing the feedback to and what context I'm writing that feedback in. Writers receive notes like these from editors and other people all the time, and they almost always interpret them the same way, as a craft problem. They interpret it as the opening is weak, the hook isn't strong enough, the voice needs work. So what do? They go fix the opening. They sharpen the first line, maybe add some drama to make it pop. Then they send it back to whoever gave the feedback to them. So it could be another editor like myself, a beta reader, an alpha reader. Perhaps they're in a writing group and they have a critique partner. These are the types of people that they would send that feedback to. And sometimes the problem is still there because the opening really wasn't the issue. In fact, it isn't really a craft problem sometimes. So this is what I mean when I'm writing feedback and I say I wasn't pulled in. All editors have their own way of doing things. They have their own way of diagnosing manuscripts, assessing a manuscript. So I'm not speaking for all editors. I'm only speaking for myself. This is what I mean when I say that I wasn't pulled in. So what I'm saying is the writer, which would be you, the writer isn't in this piece. I'm not saying that the writing is bad, nor am I saying that the craft is wrong or that it failed. What I'm saying is, somewhere between starting the draft and getting to the page I'm reading in this moment, the writer stepped back from the experience. They're writing from behind it instead of from inside it. Now, I want to be clear and precise here because this is where I'm going to push back on something that I'm very confident a lot of you have probably been taught and are still being consistently told. I know this is true for Black and brown writers. So the problem is not showing versus telling. Let me say that again. The problem is not showing versus telling. Let me be the first to tell you. Telling is not the enemy. Some of the most fire-forward writing, if you're looking at it in the way that I do from an elemental standpoint and an elemental context, some of the most fire-forward writing ever put on the page is pure declaration. James Baldwin tells. Toni Morrison tells. Audre Lorde tells. They make statements, they draw conclusions, they speak directly to you without a scene in sight, and yet their writing burns. So it's not about the technique, it's about where the writer is standing when they use that technique. Writing from inside the experience has heat, and it doesn't matter whether it's showing or telling. Writing from behind the experience goes cold. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's showing or telling. So for me, when I'm working with a writer through this, the question isn't, am I showing or am I telling in this particular paragraph, chapter, scene, or whatever? The question is, am I inside this? Or am I managing it from a safe distance? That's what fire is. It's not a technique. It's a location. Where are you standing when you write this? Are you inside it? Or are you outside it at a safe distance? Where are you standing when you write this? Now let me show you what I mean. I'm going to give you the same moment from 3 different writers, and they each have 3 completely different temperatures. Now, these writers are imaginary. I made them up for this episode. So let's set the scene. A woman is grieving. She can't bring herself to move her late husband's coffee mug from the counter. Start with writer A. The loss hit her. She spent months trying to make sense of it, moving through grief the way you move through fog, slowly without direction. This is telling. And yes, it's cold. However, it's not cold because it's telling. It's not about the technique. It's cold because the writer is behind the experience, reporting the conclusion she arrived at after the fact. She's telling you what grief meant. She's not inside the grief while she tells you. Let's go to writer B. She kept his coffee mug on the counter for 6 months. Couldn't move it. Couldn't explain why moving it felt like agreeing to something she wasn't ready to agree to. This is showing, and it's hot. The writer is inside the body of the moment, inside the specific, physical, and unreasonable detail that doesn't make rational sense, but is completely and bodily true. You feel it in the body before you understand it. If you've experienced grief, you may be able to recognize this. And now for writer C. She couldn't move the mug. 6 months, and she still couldn't move it. Grief, she was learning, has its own furniture. This is also telling in regards to technique, and it's also on fire. Same technique as writer A. Direct statement, no scene, no image, no imagery, but writer C is inside the experience while she's telling you. She's not reporting a conclusion from the outside. She's in it. She's arriving at a conclusion in real time in the body of the grief. There's no hedging or dancing around it. Writer C is in the room with the work. So you can feel the difference between the three of these energetically. Your body knows before your brain catches up, and even sometimes before your brain catches on. This is strong fire at play. And again, I can only speak for myself as an editor, but this is what I'm looking for in a manuscript. And no amount of line editing or copy editing can manufacture fire if the writer isn't there, if the writer isn't in the room with the work. So what does this look like in manuscripts? Here are some patterns I see most often when this is happening. Mind you, these are composite patterns from years of editorial work, not any one writer specifically. I'm not referring to any of my clients or anything like that. These are just things that I see repeatedly as an editor who reads the work of others. So pattern number 1 is over-explanation. The writer tells you what something means before they let you feel it. They're not in the experience. They're already past it, interpreting it for you, making sure that you don't miss the point. The effect of this is that it flattens everything. You're reading someone's conclusion instead of arriving at your own. And this isn't a showing problem per se. I've seen writers do this with scenes too. They show you a moment and then immediately explain what it meant, undoing all the work the scene just did. The instinct underneath is the reader won't get it without help. And underneath that, the experience itself isn't enough. So the writer steps outside the room and they start managing the interpretation because they don't trust you as the reader to get it. And they also don't trust themselves to write it. So pattern number 2, summary where presence should be. A writer will be in the middle of writing something genuinely moving and then hit a place that costs something. By that I mean a hard moment, saying something really real. Instead of staying inside it, they summarize. Those months were difficult. I learned a lot. Eventually things got better. Now they aren't lying. All of that is probably true, but they skipped the experience and handed you the report. And the reader feels this skip even if they can't name it, they can't identify it. So I see this happen most at the places that are hardest to inhabit, where the writing likely feels really scary to put on the page. So the writer just moves through them quickly to get to the other side, basically. And I get that. I understand that. But the reader came for the inside of those moments. That's where the heat is. That's where the reader will see themselves and connect to your words. Now, pattern number 3, hedge words as a distance. Hedge words like, it felt like, it seemed as though, in some ways, kind of, sort of, things like that. These aren't just imprecise. They are, but it's more than that. They are the writer protecting themselves from the full commitment to what they're saying. They got one foot in the room and one foot out. They're hedging, literally. So now, sometimes you're hedging because the sentence isn't quite right. That is indeed a craft problem, and revision can fix it. But sometimes you're hedging because you don't fully believe you're allowed to say it plainly and directly. Those are two very different things. One is skill, one is wound. Most conversations about craft miss this concept entirely. On the surface, everything I just described can look like a skill gap. And yeah, you can do the craft intervention, cut the hedge words, expand the summary, take out the over-explanation. That's real revision work, and it's important. But if you don't understand why you left the room, you will leave it again. In the next draft, in the next piece, in the next whatever it is that you're writing. Because the pattern is just the symptom. The wound is what's underneath it. The wound, most often, is this: the belief that your presence, your full, unmanaged, inside the room presence is not enough. That the reader needs help. That you need to do something extra to earn your place on the page. This is the performance wound in the fire element. And it shows up in writers who have been writing for years, not just those who are new to the craft. It even showed up in my own work. And I wrote about it in the essay that I mentioned at the beginning, how I channeled and built an entire elemental curriculum, only to realize after finishing it that I had been standing at a slight distance from the material the whole time I was writing it. Of course, I was faithful to what Spirit gave me when I channeled it, but I was reporting rather than pulling you inside with me. The craft fix, it helps, but the real shift happens when the writer starts to trust that their presence is what the reader actually came for and what the reader will keep coming back for. Not the explanation, not the safety net, not the show versus tell. The coming back for the writer, you, in the room, committed to the sentence, whether that sentence is an image, a declaration, or a coffee mug that hasn't moved in 6 months. That's fire. And that's what I am looking for during my elemental manuscript assessments. So the next time you receive some feedback that says, I wasn't pulled in, or if you're reading your own draft and you feel that glass wall, I want you to ask a different question than what's wrong with the writing. I want you to ask, where did I leave the room? Because the room is still there. The experience is still there. The story is simply waiting for you to step back inside it. And that's where we'll leave it for today. If something we talked about landed for you, sit with it. Journal on it. Let it do what it needs to do. Show notes are in the description with everything we mentioned and more. If this episode found you at the right moment, share it with a writer who needs it. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, beloved, keep writing from your truth. Ashe.